Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting right into something you, our listener, have been asking about.
Yeah.
The actual role of physical activity and exercise in managing adult weight.
Yeah.
You sent in a really great collection of information articles, studies, your own notes, and, well, our mission here is pretty straightforward. Just dig through it all and pull out the most crucial insights on how being active truly affects our weight.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get beyond, the usual advice and give you some solid understanding that's relevant for your overall health journey.
Absolutely. And when we talk about weight, fundamentally it boils down to energy balance, right?
Right.
The information you shared really highlights that our daily energy use has, well, three main parts.
Okay.
First, there's our resting metabolic rate. Basically, the energy we burn just keeping the lights on, being alive.
Got it.
Then there's the thermic effect of feeding. That's the energy used to digest food.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the big one we're focusing on, physical activity. What's really interesting and comes through in the sources is that while resting metabolism and digestion energy are, relatively stable,
Yeah.
physical activity is the piece we can really influence the most. And
Yeah.
that makes it a key factor in, well, both how obesity might develop and how we manage it.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Let's explore this a bit more.
Yeah.
Because the sources, they really make it clear that the benefits of moving our bodies go way beyond just the number on the scale.
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial point.
We're talking significant improvements physically and mentally across a lot of different areas.
The evidence strongly supports that. And, on the flip side, the research also really hammers home the serious risks that come with a sedentary lifestyle.
Like sitting too much.
Exactly. For instance, there was a large Canadian study, over 17,000 adults, I think. It found that the more time people spent just sitting, the higher their risk of, well, dying from any cause, and specifically from cardiovascular issues. And what's really striking, and maybe a bit surprising, is that these risks tied to sitting were there even for people who'd exercise regularly, in their free time.
That really hits home. So even if you're hitting the gym a few times a week, if you spend the rest of the day sitting, that could still be a problem.
It seems so.
It sounds like just finding ways to move more throughout the day is really important.
Mm.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. What about preventing weight gain in the first place? The sources suggest activity is pretty key there, too.
It definitely is. The information we have really underscores exercise as a cornerstone for, well, primary obesity prevention.
Okay.
There's a clear connection shown between low levels of physical activity, low recreational activity, and a greater chance of gaining weight over time.
Right.
And that same Canadian study we mentioned, it also showed that keeping up sufficient physical activity doesn't just lower the risk of weight gain, but also cuts the risk of cardiovascular disease.
It gets pretty specific, doesn't it? I saw something about young adults.
Yes, exactly. One study followed young adults as they transitioned into middle age, and it found that those who kept up higher activity levels over those, I think it was 20 years.
Wow, long study.
Yeah, they gained less weight. And what was interesting for this group, who started at a normal weight, was that about 150 minutes of moderate activity a week seemed to be enough to help keep that excess weight off.
150 minutes.
Yeah.
So like 30 minutes 5 times a week.
Pretty much. But, and this is an important nuance from the data, it also suggests that older adults and people who are already living with obesity often need even more activity than that to prevent gaining more weight.
Okay, so it's not one size fits all.
Definitely not. And this seems particularly relevant for women in midlife around menopause. They often experience weight gain, and the research suggests it might be more due to a drop in their activity energy expenditure, not necessarily eating more.
Right, right. And there was that huge study, wasn't there? Over 34,000 women.
Yes, that one was striking. It found that women who exercised more than 420 minutes a week, which is a lot.
That's like an hour a day.
Exactly. They tended to gain less weight over time. But, and here's the crucial part, you flagged this connection. More exercise, less weight gain, was mostly seen in the women who started out at a normal weight.
Ah, okay.
This study basically suggests that maybe around 60 minutes of daily activity might be what's needed to maintain a healthy weight in midlife for women.
But, and this is key, once someone was already overweight.
Yes, exactly. A critical point from that same research, once a woman was already overweight, just doing physical activity without focusing on calorie intake didn't seem to stop further weight gain.
So exercise is vital, but it's often just one piece of the puzzle, especially once weight gain has occurred.
It really seems that way. Although there are some encouraging findings for older adults. A year-long trial showed that moderate to vigorous exercise, about an hour 6 days a week, helped older adults maintain their weight better.
Oh, good.
And it even led to positive changes in body composition, like, gaining a bit more muscle.
That's definitely good news. And what about genetics? I saw something suggesting activity can even fight our genes.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? A meta-analysis, so looking at lots of studies together, actually showed that being physically active can help counteract a genetic predisposition to obesity.
So even if you have those genes linked to higher BMI.
Exactly. Even with those specific gene variants, like FTO, being active can significantly lessen that genetic risk. It's quite an empowering message, really.
It really is. It suggests we're not just destined by our genes.
Right. Making activity a regular part of your life can make a real difference. Now, shall we shift focus a bit? What about using exercise as an actual treatment for obesity? What did the information you gathered say there?
Okay, yeah. Well, the general picture seems to be that exercise on its own typically leads to only, well, modest weight loss.
Modest.
Yeah, when you look at overviews of many studies combined, systematic reviews and meta-analyses, they talk about an average weight loss difference of maybe 1.5 to 3.5 kilograms. So around 3 to 8 pounds maybe.
Okay, so not a huge amount just from exercise alone.
Right. It doesn't seem to be a quick fix for losing large amounts of weight by itself.
That's correct. But, and this is really, really important to emphasize, even with that modest overall weight loss, exercise can still lead to really significant improvements in health markers.
Like what?
Well, research shows it can help reduce body fat, shrink waist circumference, lower blood pressure, all really important for overall well-being.
Aye.
For instance, one study in men found that weight loss from exercise actually led to a greater reduction in total body fat compared to the same amount of weight loss just from diet.
Oh, interesting. Even if the overall weight loss was similar.
Well, in this case, the exercise group lost more fat for the same weight loss, though the reductions in abdominal fat and improvements in insulin processing were similar between the exercise and diet groups.
And it helps women too, right? I remember seeing something about postmenopausal women.
Yes, absolutely. A study on women after menopause who did moderate intensity exercise, something like brisk walking, also showed weight loss and a decrease in body fat. So even simpler activities can make a difference.
Okay, but then there's this other finding that comes up a lot in the sources. When you combine exercise with a calorie-restricted diet, the extra weight loss you get from adding the exercise is often, well, pretty small.
Yes, that's a consistent finding. A review looking at 18 different trials found only a small amount of additional weight loss when exercise was added to dieting.
Mm-hmm.
And another study, this one on older adults, pretty much echoed that similar weight loss, whether they just dieted and exercised.
So that raises a big question, doesn't it?
What?
Why doesn't adding exercise always lead to significantly more weight loss when people are also dieting?
It does, and the research suggests several potential reasons. It's likely a combination of factors.
Okay, like what?
Well, one idea is compensation. Some people might, maybe unconsciously, eat a bit more when they start exercising, canceling out some of the calories burned.
I exercise so I deserve this treat kind of thing.
Could be, or just subtle increases in hunger or intake. Another possibility is decreased non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. Yeah, basically fidgeting, standing, walking around during the day. Some people might subconsciously move less during the rest of their day when they do a structured workout.
Okay, that makes sense. Like they feel they've done their bit.
Sort of. Also, let's be honest, sticking to a consistent and intense exercise routine can just be difficult for many people long-term. Adherence is a real challenge.
Ew.
And then there might be physiological factors too, things like gaining muscle mass, which weighs more than fat per volume, or increases in plasma volume, the fluid in our blood. These can sometimes mask the fat loss on the scale.
Right, so the scale might not tell the whole story immediately.
Exactly. And just to illustrate the effort involved, think about walking. The calories you burn depend a lot on your body weight. So creating a really big calorie deficit just through exercise often takes a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, I can see that.
And even in studies that used higher intensity or longer duration exercise along with calorie restriction, they often still found only a limited additional weight loss compared to just the diet group. Though, it's important to note, some of those more intense programs did show other benefits, like better reductions in waist size, or even less fat stored around the liver, even if the scale difference wasn't huge.
Okay, so maybe exercise isn't the magic bullet for just pounds lost, especially when dieting, but it seems absolutely crucial for something else the sources highlight: preserving our muscle and bone mass during weight loss.
This is incredibly important, yes. When you lose weight just by cutting calories, you inevitably lose some lean body mass muscle along with the fat.
How much typically?
It can be around 20%, sometimes more, of the total weight lost. That's significant muscle loss.
Wow.
And exercise, especially resistance training, like lifting weights or using resistance bands, really helps to minimize this muscle loss.
And why is preserving muscle so important?
Oh, it's vital. It helps maintain our physical strength and function, improves how our body handles insulin, and it even helps keep our resting metabolism from dropping too much because muscle burns more calories at rest than fat does.
Okay, that makes a huge difference long term. And what about bones? Does exercise help there too during weight loss?
The evidence is a bit more mixed or maybe less conclusive, according to the sources. But there's definitely a suggestion, a potential, that exercise might also help lessen the amount of bone density we lose when we're losing weight.
And that's particularly important for certain groups, right?
Absolutely. Think about people losing very large amounts of weight, maybe after bariatric surgery, or using newer weight loss medications like semaglutide. And also for older adults who are already at higher risk of muscle loss, bone loss, and becoming frail.
So for them, keeping muscle and bone is critical.
It's critical for their long-term health, independence, and quality of life. And the research suggests that doing a combination of both aerobic exercise and resistance training is probably the most effective approach for this.
Got it. Both cardio and strength. Now, here's something from the sources that honestly surprised me a bit. Activity trackers, wearables, we see them everywhere.
Fitbits, Apple Watches.
Yeah, but according to the research you sent over, they don't normally seem to add much extra benefit for weight loss compared to standard programs without them.
That's right. It was quite interesting. Several trials compared standard behavioral weight loss interventions, counseling, support groups, etc., with programs that added wearable trackers, often with feedback, goals, sometimes even rewards. Yeah. And pretty consistently, the results showed that the groups using the trackers didn't lose significantly more weight. In fact, one fairly large, longer-term study even found slightly less weight loss in the group that used the tracker compared to the standard approach.
Really? Less? Any idea why?
The studies didn't definitively say why, but maybe relying too much on the tech, or maybe the feedback wasn't motivating in the right way long-term. It suggests that while these devices can be useful tools for, self-monitoring, just having one doesn't automatically mean better weight loss results on its own within a structured program.
That's definitely food for thought. Okay, let's move on to the really tough part for many people, keeping the weight off long term. Maintenance. What role does exercise play here?
This is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit complex.
How so?
Well, if you look at observational studies that just watch people over time, they consistently show that exercise is really important for successfully maintaining weight loss.
Okay.
People who manage to keep the weight off almost always report being much more physically active than those who regain it.
It makes intuitive sense.
It does, however. When you look at randomized controlled trials, where researchers assign some people to exercise and others not, to try and isolate the effects, the results are much more mixed. Many of these trials actually don't show a significant difference in weight regain between the group told to exercise and the control group.
Huh. That's confusing. Why the difference between observing people and actively testing it in a trial?
Yeah, it's a good question. The research suggests a few possibilities. A big one is probably adherence, how well people actually stick to the exercise routines they're assigned in a trial long term.
Right. It's one thing to be told to exercise, another to actually do it consistently for years.
Exactly. The people in observational studies who are maintaining weight loss are likely the ones who are highly motivated and have successfully integrated high levels of activity into their lives. That might be harder to replicate in a trial setting.
Okay.
Also, the amount and type of exercise prescribed in these trials varies a lot. One systematic review mentioned in our sources suggests that pretty high levels of activity, like maybe 60 minutes or more of brisk walking every day, might be what's truly needed for successful maintenance for many people.
An hour a day, that's a significant commitment.
It is. And that level might be tough for many participants in a research trial to achieve and sustain consistently. There also seems to be a dose-response relationship. The more activity people manage to do, the better their chances of keeping the weight off.
Okay, so it takes a lot, and consistency is key. Now, on a more positive note, I saw something about exercise maybe helping weight loss medications work better for maintenance.
Yes, that's an encouraging finding. One trial combined exercise with the medication liraglutide. It found that the combination led to greater success in keeping weight off compared to using just the exercise or just the medication alone.
So a synergistic effect.
Potentially, yes. And another meta-analysis showed that combining diet and exercise led to better weight maintenance after 1 year compared to just diet alone. So it seems adding exercise does help, even if the trials have complexities.
And there was that study on women suggesting even 30 minutes a day helped reduce regain.
Yes, a prospective study following premenopausal women indicated that getting at least 30 minutes of activity daily reduced their likelihood of regaining weight. So maybe even that amount provides some benefit for maintenance.
Good. And briefly, exercise also helps maintain strength after weight loss surgery, right? And maybe counteracts muscle loss from some drugs.
Exactly. It seems to play a role there too, helping preserve function. Though the sources also note we don't have definitive, specific exercise prescriptions yet for those exact situations. More research is needed.
Okay, so it's clear exercise is a really valuable tool, especially for the long haul. Now, for you listening, if you're thinking, okay, I want to get more active, what kind of guidance did our sources offer on setting up a program?
Well, the first and maybe most important piece of advice is personalization. Any exercise plan really needs to be tailored
Tailored how?
to the individual's health conditions, their age, their fitness level, and importantly, what they actually enjoy doing. If you don't like it, you won't stick with it.
That makes sense.
The research also advises, being mindful that even simple things like walking can carry a small risk of musculoskeletal issues, especially if you're just starting out or have underlying conditions.
So, start slow. Listen to your body.
Definitely. However, it also notes that for most people who are generally healthy and don't have symptoms, a formal medical evaluation isn't always necessary before starting light to moderate activity.
That's good to know. Removes a potential barrier. So
Yeah.
find something you like. What about type, intensity, duration?
The guidance really emphasizes that even small increases in activity are beneficial. Something is better than nothing.
Okay.
And generally, doing more activity leads to greater health benefits. The recommendation is usually a mix of both aerobic exercise things that get your heart rate up, like brisk walking, cycling, swimming,
Uh-huh.
and muscle strengthening activities. That could be lifting weights, using resistance bands, or even body weight exercises like push-ups and squats.
Right. A combination seems best.
It often is, and for many people, just walking can be a fantastic and really accessible place to start. One study even showed that diet plus increased lifestyle activity was just as effective as diet plus structured aerobic classes for obese women.
Wow, so just moving more in daily life counts.
It absolutely can. In terms of intensity, it's usually best to start at a low to moderate level where you can talk but maybe not sing.
Okay.
Then, if it feels okay and you're able, gradually increasing the intensity might offer some extra benefits, especially for things like blood sugar control and maybe even greater fat loss based on some studies looking at high-intensity interval training, or HIT.
Right. HIT gets mentioned a lot. How much time should we aim for each week?
A good starting point, the general public health recommendation, is aiming for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week.
Okay. The 150 number again?
Yes. However, for specifically tackling obesity, the research suggests that longer durations, maybe up to 300 minutes per week, are linked to even greater benefits.
So potentially double that initial goal for more impact on weight.
Potentially, yes. And then for weight maintenance, keeping it off, while the initial goal might still be around 150 minutes a week, remember that observational data we talked about?
The hour a day thing.
Right. That suggests that for many people, successfully keeping weight off long-term might require closer to 60 minutes or more of moderate intensity activity most days.
That's a big commitment. But good to know what might be needed. Does it have to be all at once?
No, definitely not. That's another key point. You can break it up, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It all adds up throughout the day.
That makes it seem much more achievable. What about when to exercise? Does timing matter?
That's an area where the research is still, well, a bit unclear, honestly. The best time likely varies from person to person based on schedules and preferences.
Okay.
However, there is some emerging research looking into it. Some studies hint at potential benefits for things like insulin sensitivity or cardiovascular outcomes depending on the timing.
Like what?
Well, one large study using UK Biobank data found that doing moderate to vigorous activity in the evening was actually linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular disease in adults with obesity compared to being active earlier in the day.
Oh, interesting. Evening exercise might be better for heart health in that group.
Possibly. For that specific outcome in that group, it's definitely an area where we need more research, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about weight, but let's circle back because it's so important to those health benefits that happen even if the scale doesn't budge much.
Yes, this cannot be stressed enough. Being physically active is incredibly valuable for health, completely independent of major weight loss.
So what are some of those key
Oh,
benefits?
the list is long. Better blood sugar control, improved insulin sensitivity needing both aerobic and resistance training for best effects here, enhanced physical function, especially with combined training, positive changes in cholesterol levels, lower blood pressure, reduction in that harmful abdominal fat,
Mm.
and importantly, a lower risk of developing a whole host of chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, some cancers, and ultimately a reduced risk of dying prematurely.
That's huge.
It really is. And it ties into this concept that both our fitness level and our level of adiposity or body fat are important predictors of long-term health. Well, one really powerful finding from a big review of 36 studies was that people who were technically normal weight but had poor cardiorespiratory fitness actually had a higher risk of dying than people who had a higher BMI, even obesity, but were aerobically fit.
Wow. Let me just process that. Being fit can be more protective than being thin in terms of mortality risk.
That's what that large body of evidence suggests. Fitness matters a lot.
That's a really powerful message. Fitness over just focusing on weight. Okay, finally, we should probably just briefly touch on potential risks of exercise, just to be thorough.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge, while the benefits vastly outweigh the risks for most people, potential downsides do exist.
Like,
The most common are musculoskeletal injuries, sprains, strains, etc., especially when starting out or doing too much too soon. There can also be, though much rarer, cardiac issues, especially in individuals with underlying heart conditions. And some people might experience exercise-induced bronchospasm or asthma symptoms.
okay. So things to be aware of, and the sources probably direct people to more info if they're concerned.
Exactly. They usually recommend talking to a healthcare provider if you have specific health conditions or concerns before starting something new or intense.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this all up. To bring it all together from this deep dive, physical activity is, well, absolutely vital for our overall health. Full stop.
Couldn't agree more.
And while it might not be the magic bullet for, shedding pounds rapidly on its own,
Yeah.
it plays a really critical role in preventing weight gain, especially over the long term. It can contribute to modest weight loss, sure, but its real power in weight management seems to come from how it works with diet, helping lose fat, crucially preserving that lean muscle mass,
Yes.
and maybe most importantly, helping us maintain any weight loss we achieve. That seems to be where it really shines, even if it takes significant effort.
Exactly. And the key takeaway, repeated throughout the sources, is that exercise programs need to be personalized. They need to be enjoyable for you, the individual, and sustainable for the long haul.
Find what works for you.
Find what works for you, what you like, and what fits into your life. That's the path to consistency.
Okay, so here's something to really think about for you, our listener, as we finish up. Considering everything we've discussed, especially that point about fitness sometimes being more impactful on long-term health than weight itself,
Yeah.
what's one small, realistic change you could make, starting today or tomorrow, to just incorporate more movement into your life?
Yeah.
Think beyond just the number on the scale. How can you prioritize moving your body for overall well-being? Maybe it's trying that walking route you've thought about, or adding 5 minutes of stretching, or just standing up more often.
Small steps.
Small, sustainable steps. What's one thing you can do? That's your takeaway to mull over. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.